Good morning, spiritual companions. We are reading the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, continuing the introduction on page 68. Summary of the Master's spiritual experiences. We have now come to the end of Sri Ramakrishna's sadhana, the period of his spiritual discipline. As a result of his supersensuous experiences, he reached certain conclusions regarding himself and spirituality in general. His conclusions about himself may be summarized as follows. First, he was an incarnation of God, a specially commissioned person whose spiritual experiences were for the benefit of humanity. Whereas it takes an ordinary man a whole life's struggle to realize one or two aspects of God, he had, in a few years, realized God in his diverse aspects. Second, he knew that he had always been a free soul, that the various disciplines through which he had passed were really not necessary for his own liberation, but were solely for the benefit of others. Thus, the terms liberation and bondage were not applicable to him. As long as there are beings who consider themselves bound, God must come down to earth as an incarnation to free them from bondage, just as magistrate must visit any part of his district in which there is trouble. Third, he came to foresee the time of his death. His words with respect to this matter were literally fulfilled. About spirituality in general, the following were his conclusions. First, he was firmly convinced that all religions are true, that every doctrinal system represents a path to God. He had followed all the main paths, and all had led him to the same goal. He was the first religious prophet recorded in history to preach the harmony of religions. Second, the three great systems of thought known as dualism, qualified non-dualism, and absolute non-dualism, Dvaita, Vishtha-Vedaita, and Advaita, he perceived to represent three stages in man's progress toward the ultimate reality. They were not contradictory but complementary and suited to different temperaments. For the ordinary man with strong attachment to the senses, a dualistic form of religion, prescribing a certain amount of material support, such as music and other symbols, is useful. A man of God realization transcends the idea of worldly duties, but the ordinary mortal must perform his duties, striving to be unattached and to surrender the results to God. The mind can comprehend and describe the range of thought and experience up to the Vishtha-Vaita and no further. The Advaita, the last word in spiritual experience, is something to be felt in samadhi, for it transcends mind and speech. From the highest standpoint, the Absolute and its manifestation are equally real. The Lord's name, his abode, and the Lord himself are of the same spiritual essence. Everything is spirit, the difference being only in form. Third, Sri Ramakrishna realized the wish of the Divine Mother that through him she should found a new order, consisting of those who would uphold the universal doctrines illustrated in his life. Fourth, his spiritual insight told him that those who were having their last birth on this earth, and those who had sincerely called on the Lord even once in their lives, must come to him. During this period, Sri Ramakrishna suffered several bereavements. The first was the death of a nephew named Akshay. After the young man's death, Sri Ramakrishna said, "Akshay died before my very eyes, but it did not affect me in the least. I stood by and watched how the soul left the body. It was like a sword being drawn from its scabbard. I enjoyed the scene and laughed and sang and danced over it. They removed the body and cremated it. But the next day, as I stood there, pointing to the southeast veranda of his room, I felt a racking pain for the loss of Akshay, as if somebody were squeezing my heart like a wet towel. I wondered at it and thought that the mother was teaching me a lesson. I was not much concerned even with my own body, much less with a relative. But if such was my pain at the loss of a nephew, how much more must be the grief of householders at the loss of their near and dear ones." In 1871, Mathur died, and some 5 years later, Sambhu Malik, who, after Mathur's passing away, had taken care of the master's comforts. In 1873, died his elder brother, Rameshwar, and 1876, his beloved mother. These bereavements left their impact on the tender human heart of Sri Ramakrishna, albeit he had realized the immortality of the soul and the illusoriness of birth and death. In March 1873, about a year before the death of his mother, the master met Keshab Chandra Sen. The meeting was a momentous event for both Sri Ramakrishna and Keshab. Here, the master for the first time came into actual contact with a worthy representative of modern India. Brahmo Samaj. Keshab was the leader of the Brahmo Samaj, one of the two great movements that, during the latter part of the 19th century, played an important role in shaping the course of the Renaissance of India. The founder of the Brahmo movement had been the great Raja Ramohan Roy from 1774 to 1833. Though born in an Orthodox Brahmin family, Ramohan Roy had shown great sympathy for Islam and Christianity. He had gone to Tibet in search of the Buddhist mysteries. He had extracted from Christianity its ethical system, but had rejected the divinity of Christ, as he had denied the Hindu incarnations. The religion of Islam influenced him to a great extent in the formation of his monotheistic doctrines. But he always went back to the Vedas for his spiritual inspiration. The Brahmo Samaj, which he founded in 1828, was dedicated to the worship and adoration of the eternal, the unsearchable, the immutable being, who is author and preserver of the universe. The Samaj was open to all, without distinction of color, creed, caste, nation, or religion. The real organizer of the Samaj was Devendranath Tagore from 1817 to 1903, the father of the poet Rabindranath. His physical and spiritual beauty, aristocratic aloofness, penetrating intellect, and poetic sensibility made him the foremost leader of the educated Bengalis. These addressed him by the respectful epithet of Maharishi, the great seer. The Maharishi was a Sanskrit scholar and, unlike Raja Ramohan Roy, drew his inspiration entirely from the Upanishads. He was an implacable enemy of image worship and also fought to stop the infiltration of Christian ideas into the Samaj. He gave the movement its faith and ritual. Under his influence, the Brahmo Samaj professed one self-existent supreme being who had created the universe out of nothing, the God of truth, infinite wisdom, goodness and power, the eternal and omnipotent, the one without a second, whom men should love and obey, believe in and worship, to merit salvation in the world to come. By far, the ablest leader of the Brahmo movement was Keshab Chandra Sen, 1838 to 1884. Unlike Raja Rammohan Roy and Devendranath Tagore, Keshab was born in a middle-class Bengali family and educated in an English school. He did not know Sanskrit and very soon broke away from the popular Hindu religion. Even at an early age, he came under the spell of Christ and professed to have received the special favor of John the Baptist, Christ, and St. Paul. When he strove to introduce Christ to the Brahmo Samaj, a rupture with Devendranath became inevitable. In 1868, Keshab broke with the older leaders and founded the Brahmo Samaj of India, Devendra retaining leadership of the first Brahmo Samaj, now called the Adi Samaj. Keshab possessed a complex nature. When passing through a great moral crisis, he spent much of his time in solitude and felt that he heard the voice of God. When a devotional form of worship was introduced into the Brahmo Samaj, he spent hours in singing kirtan with his followers. He visited England in 1870 and impressed the English people with his musical voice, his simple English, and his spiritual fervor. He was entertained by Queen Victoria. Returning to India, he founded centers of the Brahmo Samaj in various parts of the country. Not unlike a professor of comparative religions in a European university, he began to discover, about the time of his first contact with Sri Ramakrishna, the harmony of religions. He became sympathetic toward the Hindu gods and goddesses, explaining them in a liberal fashion. Further, he believed he was called by God to dictate the world God's newly revealed law, the new dispensation, the Navavidhan. In 1878, a schism divided Keshab's Samaj. Some of his influential followers accused him of infringing the Brahmo principles by marrying one of his daughters to a wealthy man before she had attained the marriageable age approved by the Samaj. This group seceded and established the Sadharan Brahmo Samaj. Keshab, remaining the leader of the Navavidhan, Keshab now began to be drawn more and more toward the Christ ideal, though under the influence of Sri Ramakrishna, his devotion to the Divine Mother also deepened. His mental oscillation between Christ and the Divine Mother of Hinduism found no position of rest. In Bengal and some other parts of India, the Brahmo movement took the form of Unitarian Christianity, scoffed at Hindu rituals, and preached a crusade against the image worship. Influenced by Western culture, it declared the supremacy of reason, advocated the ideals of the French Revolution, abolished the caste system among its own members, stood for the emancipation of women, agitated for the abolition of the early marriage, sanctioned the remarriage of widows, and encouraged various educational and social reform movements. The immediate effect of the Brahmo movement in Bengal was the checking of the proselytizing activities of the Christian missionaries. It also raised the culture of India in the estimation of her English masters, but it was an intellectual and eclectic religious ferment born of the necessity of the time. Unlike Hinduism, it was not founded on the deep inner experience of sages and prophets. Its influence was confined to a comparatively few educated men and women of the country, and the vast masses of the Hindus remained outside it. It sounded monotonously only one of the notes in the rich gamut of the eternal religion of the Hindus. End of today's reading, with blessings.